So we're going to go through and talk about lead generation. Really what we're talking about today is setting appointments. And ultimately, where I really like to start with this is I always want to start by kind of just giving you a little bit of the background of my career in real estate. And what I mean by that is I feel like what I'm going to teach and talk about today, where it came from, is my experience. And so I kind of just find it helpful to start by talking kind of about that. So, which I got to apologize, because until Aubrey gets here, I'm going to be staring at you the whole time.
That's great.
Even though I guess I could look over here at the computer a time or two, but
No problem.
anyway, so my wife and I started to look at houses, to buy a house in probably it was 92, maybe 93, something like that. And I don't even know how, but somehow we got connected with this real estate agent that started to show us HUD homes. And the first house we found that we were going to try to buy was $50,000 was the list price on it. I know, doesn't it? But here's the funny thing is, at the time we were like 50,000. I don't know if we can afford that. So now you can't even buy a car for that anymore, right? But so first part of 1992-ish, something like that, we go and we're looking at houses. This agent shows us this HUD home. We don't get it because we got outbid. It sold for like 60 or 65, something like that. I don't know. But so we get outbid on this house, and this agent continues to show us properties. Well, along the way, we then decided, well, I wonder if we could go build and get a house. And so I had an uncle that was a builder. Still, the company that he owns still is in place. And my cousin just runs it now instead of my uncle. But so I went to my uncle and I said, we've been looking at houses. We just wanted to see, I don't even know if it's a possibility, but could we build with you, and how much would it cost, and yada, yada. So he tells us he's got this new neighborhood. He could get us into a house and it would cost, I think our price was 75,000 on that one or something. But turns out we could afford it. We could buy it. So we go and we have him build the house for us. Well, not long after that, or actually, let me back up. So while I'm out looking at houses with this agent, though, I started like thinking, well, this is kind of a cool job. Like, she just goes and opens a door and we go look around, and then she gets paid 3% of whatever it was. So I had asked the agent, hey, this seems like kind of a cool job. How would I find out about doing it? And at that time, I was still going to school. I was at Salt Lake Community College and was just about done at the community college when I made the decision I'm going to go do real estate. So I then quit school, went to real estate school, got my license. After I got my license, actually, I keep skipping. Let me back up. So I had gone to my uncle after he had built our home for us, which I learned through that process. And I always try to remind myself this, because we did not include the agent when I went to my uncle to have him build the house for us. And I didn't know at the time how that all worked, and so whatever. But so I had talked to my uncle before I went to real estate school, and I said, I think I want to go get my real estate license. And so how would that work? And he says, well, I have 4 agents that sit my model homes. 2 of them I paid over $60,000. The other 2 I paid over $100,000. Well, at that time, I was working at a bank. I was making about $35,000 a year. And so for me, I was like, the idea of 60,000 sounded great to me. Sign me up. I want to do it. So I go to real estate school. I get done with real estate school and I call my uncle and I say, okay, got my license. I'm ready to go to work. And so when can I start? And he says, well, here's the problem. I have 4 agents that sit my model homes. And if I stick you in to that mix, now I've got 5 agents. The amount of money that gets made by those agents isn't going to go up because I've added a 5th agent. It's just, now we're going to take $320,000 that those agents were making and divide it by 5 instead of 4, and they wouldn't be happy with that. So until one of them leaves, I don't have an opening. I can't do anything. And I said, okay, well, what should I do? And he said, why don't you call your cousin, my cousin who now runs this company, the building company. And I call up my cousin and said, okay, what do you think I should do? And he said, well, you have two options. And when you get into real estate, you have two different options. One is you go to a company that maybe gives you a little bit less of a split, but is going to train you. Or you go to a company that gives you a high split and no training. And I said, okay, what do you recommend? And my cousin said, well, I got my real estate license and I went to a high split, no training company, and I'm now an appraiser. He said, so if I were doing it again, I would go for the lower split, but to get trained so that you can actually make a career out of it. And so from that, I went back to my uncle and said, okay, talk to my cousin. He told me that I should go to a company that's going to give me good training. Where should I go? And he said, well, I happen to know a guy that's a broker and he's in West Jordan, and his agent seemed to like him. He probably does a good job. Well, you should go talk to him. So I call up this guy, his name was Tom, and I call up Tom and I set up an appointment to go meet with him. And I didn't realize at the time, and maybe you guys were brighter than me and knew this, but I didn't know at the time. Like, I thought I had to go and interview to like get hired on with that company. I didn't realize that he was the one really hoping I would choose him to go to work for. So I like dress up. I show up at the interview with to meet with Tom, and I sat down and like I'm sitting there expecting him to interview me. And to be honest, I don't remember how that all went, but I remember leaving saying, well, okay, well, let me know if you have room for me or not, which again, like at that time I was probably 25, I think at that time. And I should have known, like when he walked me through the office and there was like nobody there, that there was room for me to be there. But anyway, so I was like, well, let me know if you have room for me. And so I left and then went home, and my wife asked me, how'd your interview go? And I told her, and she said, well, hopefully they'll want you. And he called me and said, yeah, come to work for us. And I was so excited thinking, okay, I got a job. So I remember I showed up to the office, and I have always been the type that when I had a job, it was like, I don't want to sit around and do nothing. Like, I want to be busy. So I went to the manager and I was like, okay, tell me what to do. How do I get going with this in real estate? And he said, okay, first thing you should do is go make a list of everyone that you know. Well, I had only been married for, I guess, I don't know, 5 years maybe at that time. So I still had our wedding announcement list. So I was like, great, I've got my list. Here's my list. And he said, okay, now go write a card to each one of them telling them you started in real estate. So I went and bought these announcement cards and, wrote a note and put a card in there and mailed it off to all the people. And I was like, okay, now what should I do? And the manager said, I think he probably was just kind of sick of like me coming. What do I do? What do I do? What do I do? And so he finally said this: if you'll go knock on doors for 2 hours every day for the next 2 years, you'll be fine and you'll never have to worry about it again. And I was like, okay. So I had gone to a training that the company had. And at the training, I happened to meet an agent by the name of Shirley. And so Shirley had started right the same time as I did. So we had gone to this class together, and I asked Shirley, so what, how do we do this? And Shirley said, well, let's just plan on meeting every day at the office at 9 o'clock. So every day, 9 a.m., she and I would meet at the office. And typically we would go into a conference room and we would do some type of a role play of our door knocking. And then she and I would jump in a car at about 9:45, and we would drive out to Kearns. And we had an area out in Kearns that we had decided we're going to knock on all the doors in this neighborhood. And the reason being is at that time, those houses were all $80,000. And so we were like, yeah, they're cheap, but if you put it on the market, they're going to sell really fast. And so we decided that's where we were going to door knock. So Shirley and I would go out there every day and we would knock on doors. And so we would knock on doors until, let me back up again. All right. So part of when I was meeting with my manager, he asked me this. He said, well, how much money do you want to make in real estate? And I gave the answer that pretty much every agent, I've had my license now since 96. So what, 26-ish years? Is that right? Yeah, I guess 27. Yeah, I guess it would be 27 now. 27 years. In the 27 years I've had my license, this number has not really changed much. So he said, how much do you want to make in real estate? And the number that I said, which is what most agents still say when they come into real estate, is $100,000. Well, at that time, the average commission that was getting paid out was $2,000. So if I wanted to make $100,000 and the average commission was $2,000, I'm going to have how many closings? Yeah, so he did this with me. This is the exercise my manager did with me. Okay, the average, you want to make 100,000, the average commission is 2,000, you're going to have to do 50 closings. And now, one of the things that I don't know if pride myself is the right word to use, but one of the things that I put a lot of value on is I believe that just power comes out of telling the truth. And so one of my mantras, that's probably the best way to say it. One of my mantras in life is power comes out of telling the truth. So I'm going to tell you what he told me. I'm going to tell you this because you're going to hear it throughout real estate, but I'm also going to tell you it's actually not true. Okay, so what I'm about to say is not true, but it's a good place to start. So even though I'm saying it's not true, and you're going to hear it, you're going to hear it from people within our own company. You're going to hear this. It's not true, but it's a good place to start. Okay, so just kind of keep that in mind, that it still is a good place to start. So what he told me, you want to make 100,000, the average commission's 2,000, and then you're going to have to do 50 closings a year. The number of contacts you do on a daily basis is the number of transactions you'll do in a year, was the next thing that he told me. Now, that's the part where I'm saying that that's actually not really true. And the reason I say that is I have spent the last over 17 years training agents. And during that time, I have watched agents go out and do this and do 50 contacts every day. And I've watched some agents do 50 contacts every day and never get a closing ever. But yet we have our top agent, who is Brian Burnett down in our St. George office, that his goal every day is to do 50 contacts every day. And he will make $3 million from real estate this year. So this is a good place to start, is in terms of the number of contacts you do is the number of transactions you'll do. Not really true, but it's a good place to start. So that's what my manager told me. Now, and I'll show you why we say that and why it is a good way to approach it to begin with. So my manager told me that. And so I said, okay, great. I will do 50 contacts every day. So Shirley and I would get in the car. We'd go knock on doors. We would knock on doors until we had done 25 contacts. Once she and I had done 25 contacts, we'd go back to the office. We'd go our separate ways for lunch. Then we would meet back up at the office at 2 o'clock. And then we would jump on the phone and we would start making phone calls until we got to the other 25. So I was doing 25 contacts from knocking on doors on a daily basis, and then 25 from getting on the phone. Now, back then, we would have, in order to get that, it took typically somewhere around 4, maybe 5 hours on a bad day to get to 50 contacts. So we have on here, hopefully you're paying attention and listening. Mike, do you mind unmuting for a second, or are you in the middle of a phone call?
No, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Okay, cool. Hey, how many contacts do you do a day?
20 to 30. It just depends on the day. It depends on where I'm calling.
Okay, how long does it take you to do that?
8 to noon.
Okay, so it's about 4 hours to get 30 contacts.
Correct.
Okay, so and the reason I asked that is I know Mike makes calls every day. Like, he's awesome at it. So, but back then you were typically, I could get to 50 in 4 to 5 hours. And part of that is people picked up the phone more than we do today.
Where are you getting the number to call? Like, who are you calling? Just people you know?
Yeah, that was a good question. So what I did back then was we had a book that was about this thick
Okay.
that was called the Cold Directory. And so what I would do is I would take that book and I'd go in my office. That Cold Directory was street order. So you could kind of go find a street name, and then it had everybody, think of it as like a phone book, but it was sorted by address. So you could go get the streets and do it. So you can still do that today with, it's called Cole Realty Resource. So you can still sign up through them and they'll give you phone numbers. The challenge again, though, that we have today is that getting people to pick up their phone, because and I'm guilty of it too. Somebody called this morning, and I just looked at the phone and was like, I don't know that number. I almost didn't answer it. And then I did because I thought it might be one of our agents, and it was one of the agents with the company that had a question. But so there are ways you can get phone numbers. So through RedX, you can get, they call it geo leads, which basically just phone numbers that way. The challenge again on that is that a lot of times the phone numbers aren't correct on there and some of that stuff. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Like if you're trying to call a certain street and you ended up calling somebody, let's say a street over here and it was somebody in Harriman, it doesn't really matter. You're just calling to talk to people. So who cares if where
Do you
they're at
think that that's like the only way to become successful in real estate is by doing that?
is by doing what?
Like.
Making a
knocking
phone call?
on door- Yeah. I
You
mean,
have to, yes, you have to talk to people to be
Yes,
successful.
yes,
Yes.
obviously that, I just mean like looking for phone numbers and things like that, like what if you post on social media and people start following you and things like that?
So I'm trying to decide if I want to answer that right now or wait till
Okay.
a little later.
Okay.
Because we're going to talk about that.
Okay,
I just wasn't probably going to do it till Thursday. So, but
okay,
I'll
okay.
give you the quick answer on that. Here's the brief answer, and then we'll talk more on
Okay.
Thursday on that. But the quick answer to that is there is passive marketing and then there's active. And you want to do some passive, no question, you should do some passive, but you also need to do some active.
Okay.
And so to me, the passive side of that is doing social media and things. And can that work? Absolutely, it can. But I also want to make sure you're doing the active side of it, because too many times agents fail out of the business because they don't do the active
Yes,
side. So I wouldn't say it's the only way,
Yeah.
but you want to be active in it for
Okay.
sure. So, yeah, but we'll get into more of that. All right. Now, so with that, so I was doing 50 contacts every day. It would take me between 4 and 5 hours to get that, which again, as you just heard from Mike, so real quick too, Mike, are you doing just listed, just sold, or is that all SOI to get to the 30?
Just listed, just sold, and then I'll take a week out of the month and devote it to SOI calls. So
Okay.
like this week, I'm working on my SOI. So I'll have, like during my SOI week, I generally have a lot less contacts made. Versus like the just listed, just solds. And by the way,
And where-
full subscription is about $1,000 a year.
Okay, is that where you get yours?
Yeah,
Cool, yeah, so it's through the, okay. Awesome, thanks. Okay, so I would go out and do the 50 contacts. Well, here's the struggle, and this is part of why I say this whole idea of this is not exactly the truth, is because I did for a year and a half, I did 50 contacts essentially every day. And the only reason I say essentially every day is because there were occasionally one day of the week where I would only hit 25 contacts instead of 50. But I did a minimum of 25 every single day. And most of the days, the majority of the days, that's probably a better way of saying it, was 50. Like there was maybe one day a week where I would only do 25 instead of the 50. But even that was maybe a couple of times a month that I would only get 25 in. So I had done that though for a year and a half. And after a year of doing it, I had only had 17 closings. So now if you times that by the 2,000 though, that still is going to equate to basically what I was making before I came into real estate. Well, I don't know about you guys, but I didn't come into real estate just to replace the income I had made from my other job. Like that was not what I wanted to do. I was doing because I wanted to make $100,000 a year. So I had been licensed about a year and a half. I had a transaction that I had under contract where I had the listing and the buyer on it. And I specifically remember my wife telling me, if that deal doesn't close, you got to go get a real job. And luckily that deal closed, which I still to this day say there was some type of divine intervention in that deal closing, because I have only had one transaction ever in my whole career that ended up having the title company have to pay a claim because of a title issue. And it was on that property. The builder, so it was a guy that built a home and I had it listed and then I found the buyer for that house. When the closing happened, the title company called him and said, hey, there's a lien on here for, I don't remember, $25,000 for the lot. And he said, oh, I already paid it. And she didn't verify. She went ahead and recorded the closing of the transaction and it closed. And then as soon as my buyers moved in, the next week they had a foreclosure, notice of default basically on their door. And they called me saying, we haven't even made our first payment yet. How are we in foreclosure? Well, come to find out, the developer had never gotten paid on the lot. So he was gonna now try to go after that. So the title company had to pay out $25,000 on that. So I know, like, I was meant to be in the business because that should not have, it wouldn't have closed. The guy had no money. The builder built the house basically for free. So had he had to pay that 25,000, he would have had to bring it in and he didn't have it. So anyway, it worked out. Well, right after that, I went to this training and I went to a training that taught me what I'm going to teach you guys today. And when I went to this training, the guy that did the training actually lived in La Jolla, California. He actually lives up in Park City now, but he lived in La Jolla, California when I first met him, and he had come to Salt Lake to do this training. Well, in this training, the way the training worked was it was a Monday, Tuesday, then we had a break and we'd come back the next Wednesday and Thursday, then you'd have a 2-week break and came back Friday. So it was a 5-day training spread out over a month. Well, on the second day of the training, he started to talk about what we're talking about right now. And I raised my hand and asked a question to him because somewhat similar to what you were asking, Jessica. I was kind of like, okay, I want to know how to make this business work. I came into the business because I wanted to make money, not because I wanted to replace my income. And so in the training, I said to him, okay, I'm frustrated. I raised my hand and said, I'm frustrated because I'm trying to make this work. I really am. And I will do anything anybody tells me to do. Like, if you tell me this will work and do it, I'll go and do it. But it's not working. And I said, my manager told me go make 50 contacts a day and you'll make 50 closings a year. I said, I'm doing that. I've had 17 closings a year in the past year. And yeah, it's replaced my income, but I need more. And what he did then is he drew this. So he drew this out and we had a conversation about it. So that's what we're going to do now. So he told me that there were 4 things that needed to happen in order for me to be successful in real estate. So that's what I want to give to you guys. And the challenge is the way that, that was a horrible box that I could go through. The challenge is the way that here's the problem. The way that most managers will approach success in real estate, the way that most of them do it is, well, in fact, let me ask you guys. If I came to you, so you were going to be my coach for real estate, okay? I came to you and I said, okay, I want to make $100,000 a year, which means I need to get 50 closings to take place every year. I've had 17. How do I get more? What would you say, or what would you guess most brokers, and by the way, this piece is true of how most brokers would train. What do you think most brokers would tell a person who said, I'm doing 50 contacts and I've gotten 17. If I want to double this, what do I need to do? What do you think most people would tell them?
Do 100 contacts a day?
Most of the time, that's the answer that people are going to give, is that if you're doing 50 contacts a day and you're going to get 17 closings, if you will do twice that, then you'll double your income. The problem with that is, well, Mike already said it's taking him basically 4 hours to get 30 contacts. So you're going to have to work for 12 hours to get to 90 contacts. Sound good? Doesn't to me either. Okay, so here's what he did though, is he said the problem most people have is that they don't really understand how this works. And so he drew this on the board. And what I'm going to draw here is the learning curve. Okay, so what you're looking at is the learning curve, or half of the bell curve. And any new skill that you are going to learn is going to follow this purple line here, this learning. And the reason I'm kind of going blank here for a second is I'm trying to remember the name of a book. There's a great book about this learning curve. And the name of it is Mastery. And the author is George Leonard, or else it's Leonard George, but I think it's George Leonard. But the name of the book is Mastery. It's a thin book, like it's a read it in 1 or 2 nights kind of a thing. But he talks about this process of how anytime you're going to learn a new skill, it's going to go something like this. Well, same thing applies for real estate, but what this guy drew on the board was then this, is he took this and then he broke this down into 4 different areas that looked like this. And he said, here's the problem, is what typically happens. In fact, he called this purple line the journey to mastery. So this is what your journey to mastering real estate is going to look like. And he said, the problem is this. The first phase of this journey is what we would call the activities phase. Now, question for you guys. In real estate school, did they teach you how to sell real estate?
No,
No. Yeah, what did they teach you?
how to stay out of jail.
Essentially, they taught you how to stay out of jail, right? They taught you, here's the laws, here's how you stay out of trouble. Now that you've gotten your real estate license, go ahead. Meaning, like, it's crazy to me, because if you wanted to cut somebody's hair, you have to put in so many hours in school before they'll let you actually cut someone's hair. Yet we can go deal with people's assets, that probably for most people, the biggest asset they own, and you don't have to have ever done it. You're licensed and could go do it, and which is crazy. Now, but because of that, is what happens is once we get our real estate license, we get to go through this phase. And what happens then is, because most people weren't taught really how to sell real estate, we were taught how to stay out of jail and taught laws and things. As soon as you get our real estate license, we now feel like, okay, now I got to learn how to do it. And so because of that, what happens is then we get stuck in this activities phase. The activities phase is, how do I get on the MLS? How do I fill out a contract? How do I access the office? How do I, and all of that stuff is in the activities phase. Now, if this purple line represented your income, how much money do you make in that phase?
None.
Nothing. Yeah, that's right. And most agents, just as an FYI, 13 out of 14 agents that start real estate will be gone within 2 years. 13 out of 14 people who get their real estate license will be gone within 2 years. And the reason is because nobody teaches them how to actually go and do the business. Nobody helps them with what we're going to talk about today. So what happens is agents get stuck in this, I'm getting ready to get ready so that when I'm ready, I'll be ready. Like that, they get stuck in that phase. And that's what happens, is they never get into action. So luckily for me though, like I told you guys, when I went to my manager, said, tell me what to do. He said, go make 50 contacts a day. Well, the next phase in this process is what's called the contacts phase. In the contacts phase, what you are then doing is getting out and making contacts. Well, what I didn't understand, in fact, I would even argue my manager didn't understand when he trained me, which by the way, he was a good manager and respected and all that stuff, but all he knew to tell me to do is get out of the activities phase and get into the contacts phase. Well, in the contacts phase, which is what I was doing, is I was making the 50 contacts every day. The problem with the contacts phase, again, if we come back to this purple line being your income, what happens during the contacts phase?
We'll ask you questions.
Okay, good. And
You don't know.
you don't know the answer.
The answer, that's what I was just about to say. How can you feel confident doing it? Because yeah, you can do that, but I'm like, I wouldn't even know what to say.
Yep. So, and I told Jordan this yesterday, but my first time ever going out door knocking, I had driven out to an area. So in fact, it was right after or might have been right before, actually, before Bangor Highway was getting put in. And so I was out knocking on a door of somebody whose house right now actually is right next to Bangor Highway and 5400 South. And I had knocked on his door and was right before we went out to knock on doors. I asked the agent, now what do I do if somebody says yes? And he was like, don't worry, they won't. And I was like, well, then why are we doing this? But so he just said, well, just tell him you'll come back later. So I knocked on the door and the guy said, yeah, we do want to sell. And I was like, okay, well, I'll come back later and talk to you, which is I did. And it ended up being my first listing, which it never sold. And part of the problem with that was, again, nobody trained me how to really get it good price and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, I was going out making 50 contacts a day, and yeah, people are going to ask you questions. Here's the thing. Keep in mind, you actually do know more than they do. So Jessica, just know you know more than they do, even though you might not feel like you do.
It's just like the paperwork and everything, like I have a listing right now, my first one, and I'm like, everything I have to keep going to Ruby, because I'm like, oh my gosh, it's so much. I know once you do it enough though.
Yeah, that's exactly. And the biggest thing I would say for that is just know the example I like to use on this is 2001 when the planes hit the towers in New York. And I don't know if this is a true story, by the way, but this is what I heard, is that obviously there are fire alarms and stuff going off. And so people are all going to the stairwell to go down the stairs. And imagine 50 stories or however many, I don't know how many stories they were, probably more than that, hundreds of. Yeah. But so imagine having that many people working in a building trying to file into the stairwells. It's going to be a slow moving process going down, right? Well, the story I heard is that a lady was just freaking out. And that she was just standing in the stairwell, just like freaking out. I can't believe it. What's going to happen? I don't know what's going to happen. What's going to happen? And she was saying, I'm so scared. And the story that I heard is somebody up above said, well, then go down scared, but keep going. And that's kind of my answer on this is like, yes, you might be scared of like, well, I don't know what to do. The good news is we're going to hear, like you said, you got Ruby, you got me, you have people that are going to help you as you don't know. Just the main thing I would say is call and ask questions early, not late. I always hate it when I get the phone call of, well, this is what I did. And I wasn't sure if it was right. And I'm like, well, then you should have called and asked first. So, but yeah, just go do it. The secret is you got to get out of this activities phase and into the contacts phase as soon as you can. Like the faster you can say, you know what, I might not know all the answers. I might not, because every one of us was that way. When we first started it, none of us knew the answers. And like I said, I remember that very first time I went out door knocking, I was like, what am I going to do? I wasn't worried if somebody yelled at me, slammed the door. I didn't care. Like I was not worried about that. My fear was, what if somebody says yes? I'm not going to know what to do if they say yes. And you know, we figured it out. And like I said, that first listing I got didn't sell, but I learned a very good lesson from it. So anyway, all right. So we want to get out of the activities and into the contacts phase as quick as we can. Now, in the contacts phase, you'll notice there's not a whole lot of money going on. That was the problem that what happened to me is, so I went to this training and I raised my hand to this trainer and I said, okay, help me figure this out because I'm doing 50 contacts a day. And so he then drew this on the board and he said, here's your problem. The reason you're not making money is because you're stuck in the contacts phase. Now, I don't take away from what I'm saying that you don't have to keep track of your contacts. You should. But what this guy told me is, here's your problem. The way you're approaching this business is you're approaching it from the standpoint of, I got to get 50 contacts. And he said, what happens when you hit your 50 contacts? And I said, I feel good. I feel good that I got my contacts. And he said, and then you go home and do what? And I was like, I go home and I feel good that like I did my job. And he said, that's the problem, is you're feeling like as long as you get 50 contacts, you did your job, but that's not your job. And I said, okay, then what is my job? And he said, that's the key. Now you'll notice on this learning curve, the steepest part of the curve is in this section. Well, he then labeled this section, and I'm going to just shorthand it, but is the appointments phase. The next step is what we would call the appointments phase.
And he said, here's your problem. You're so focused on contacts that you're missing out on getting appointments. And I didn't understand what he meant when he said that, but he said that the biggest challenge or struggle that I was having was I was so focused on the contacts that I was missing the appointments that were available. And again, I didn't really get that. But so the first thing he said, and the first thing for you guys is focus. So the first principle in terms of your being successful in this business is you have to focus on setting appointments. Okay, so your focus when you're prospecting has got to be on setting appointments, not on making contacts. Now, what he then did with me is he said, okay, so you've been doing 50 contacts every single day. And I said, yes. And he said, all right, so tomorrow starting, so remember this was on a Tuesday because we had been Monday, it was the second day of the class, so it was a Tuesday. And he said, tomorrow, I want you to show up to the office with a commitment. The whole 5-day training was all about commitment actually, but I happened to sidetrack him onto this. And he said, you're going to show up tomorrow morning and you're going to prospect until you set an appointment. And I said, okay. And he said, so will you do that? Will you tomorrow go to work and don't go home until you set an appointment? And I said, yeah, that's fine. Now, I remember the whole class we were doing is about commitment and what it meant to make commitments. And so he said to me, I'm not sure you understand what I'm asking you to do. And I said, no, I get it. I need to set an appointment tomorrow. And he said, okay, but let me just make sure you understand. I want you to go home tonight. And I want you to tell your wife, I am not coming home tomorrow if I don't set an appointment. And I was like, oh, like I really have to sit. He's like, yeah, you don't get to go home if you don't set an appointment. And I was like, ooh, I don't know if I want to commit to that. And he said, you can do it. I promise you, you can do it. And I said, I don't know. But he said, it's 1 week. Like what the worst case scenario, you just don't go home for a week. Like it'll be fine. And I was like, all right, I will do it. So I then committed to set one new appointment every day. So I went from you're going to make 50 contacts every day to I won't go home until I set an appointment. Now, prior to that, this whole idea of 50 contacts, like I said, that for me was like, it was a life and death kind of a thing. There were times when I would maybe leave the office heading home, knowing I still need to make 3 more contacts before I get home. And this is probably dumb, but this is how I did it was I would pull into gas stations on my way home because I was like, the people standing there putting gas in their car can't like slam the door on my face or anything. And so what I would do is this, and I'm not necessarily recommending this, but this is what I would do. Is I would pull into the gas station and I'd have business cards. And so I'd pull out a business card and I would walk up to whoever was filling their gas. So we'll pretend it's you. And I'd say, hi, my name's Russ. Will you do me a favor?
Sure.
And that's what they would say. And I'd say, here's my business card. I'm a local real estate agent. And if you hear of anybody thinking of buying or selling real estate anywhere, have them give me a call. And then they'd go, oh, okay, sure. And then I would go, okay, there's a contact. And then I would drive and go to another gas station and I'd pull over and I'd go walking up and say, hey, could you do me a favor? Will you just hold on to my business card? And if you hear of anybody thinking of buying or selling real estate anywhere, have them give me a call. Yeah, sure. Now, the truth is, remember, power comes out of telling the truth. The truth is, I probably knew the moment that I drove off that business card was getting thrown in the trash there. But for me, I was like, yep, but I got my 50 contacts. Well, now all of a sudden it was, you can't go home until you set an appointment. So I made it a commitment to do that. Now, let me ask you this. If you had to do that, and you guys on Zoom can answer this as well, but if that was you, and I said to you, tomorrow morning, or just tomorrow, you have to set an appointment tomorrow. You cannot go home until you set an appointment. What would you do differently tomorrow than you did today?
I'll be here.
Okay,
I'd be out.
okay, go out knocking on doors, okay? What about you guys on Zoom? What would you do differently? You can't go home until you set an appointment.
I would change my conversations with everybody from. Let me know if you hear of anybody to actually like,
More information, like, are they renting, looking to buy or sell?
Okay, good. Yeah, good. You guys are right on the right track. So the first thing, so Lisa said, prepare. Good. Yeah, so here's the first thing I will tell you. For me, and you may not have caught it, but I was typically showing up to the office at 9 a.m. Well, all of a sudden now, when it's like I have to set an appointment tomorrow, I left my house before 7 a.m. the next day because I was like, now, again, back then, we didn't have like the Red X, we didn't have that available to us. So the way that we got for sale by owners was out of the newspaper. So on my way from my house to the office, I would stop by a gas station and grab a newspaper. And then I'd get to the office, I could open up the classifieds, you'd circle all the for sale by owners. So for me, it was like, I gotta be out so I can stop and get the newspaper. Then when I got to the office, I was like, I gotta go sit down on the computer and pull up, because again, even back then, you didn't have the MLS, at least I didn't, at home, like you only had it at the office, and it was, the dial-up computer at the office. So I would go to the office, I would go and pull up all of the expireds. Then I would go to that big book, the Kohl's directory, and look up by the street address to find the phone number for the people who lived there, to then start, so that way, starting at 8 o'clock, I could be on the phone starting to call.
Expired on the MLS just means what? It didn't go through or?
Yeah, it means somebody had the home listed for a period of time, whatever their listing agreement was, and then it didn't sell. So the listing contract has expired. And so then agents can call those people to say, hey, I noticed your home
Yeah.
came up on the computer as an expired listing, and call them to see when you plan on interviewing agents. So I was doing that so that I could get on the phone. Now, the other thing, let me back up. The other thing that he had me commit to do as part of this was I couldn't go home until I set an appointment, but as soon as I set my appointment for the day, I could leave and go home. And in fact, he said, you should leave and go home. Like, soon as you set your appointment, you're done working for the day. You have accomplished what you needed to do. Now, obviously, if I had an appointment or I had a contract I was working on, I could do that. But he was like, don't just be at the office to be at the office. Like, be there and be effective with your time, set an appointment, and then leave and go home. Go be with your family, go do whatever you want to do, go golfing, whatever. So that next morning, I showed up at the office. I was there. I left my house before 7 a.m. I was to the office by 7:30. I had pulled the expireds. I had looked up the expireds. 8 o'clock, I'm on the phone. I'm calling. Now, Shirley had not participated in the training with me, so she didn't show up to the office for a whole hour, which was 9 o'clock. So 9 o'clock, and then typically we would go about 9:15 into a conference room and do some role play. So 9:15, she comes and she grabs me and says, hey, you want to go into the office or a conference room and do role play? Sure. So we go into the conference room and we did the role play, and we got done with role play, and she said, all right, so I'll just meet you out and we would take turns who drove out. She's like, I'll drive out to go door knocking. Well, between 8 and 9 o'clock, I had set an appointment, which meant I was done for the day and had to go home. So I said to Shirley, hey, I'm not going to go door knocking today. I'm done for the day. And Shirley was in a great accountability partner. So that's the other thing we're not talking necessarily about today, but have an accountability partner, have somebody to hold you accountable to do what you're supposed to do. Shirley was awesome for that for me. And I was good for Shirley as well, but I always felt like she was meaner than me. I don't know if that's the right word, but if I ever tried to say, I'm not going door knocking, Shirley would be like, no, get in the car, you're going door knocking. And I'd say, yeah, but I got this deal and it's falling apart. She'd say, good, that's why you need to go door knocking, is you need to go find a new deal to replace it. Let's go. Like, she would force me almost to get in the car. She was great. But this particular day, she was doing that. No, you're going to go door knocking. You're going to regret it. Think about how much business you're missing out on. Like, she was just pounding on me. And I said, for the next week, Shirley, once I get an appointment, I'm done. So even if we do go door knocking, I got to drive separate, because as soon as I set my appointment, part of my commitment is once I've gotten my appointment, and again, a new appointment, so it couldn't be somebody I'd met with before. Had to be a new appointment. I'm done and I'm going home. So she said, okay, you're just gonna regret it though. When my name's higher than yours on the board, then you're gonna regret it. And I was like, well, for a week, I'm trying it and seeing what happens. Well, so I had set my appointment. So I went and did what other work I needed to do. I go walking in the door because I had gone home and told my wife, I won't be home tomorrow if I don't set an appointment. So I come walking in the door at noon and she's like, are you home for lunch? And I was like, no, I'm done for the day. And she was like, I don't think this is a good idea. And mostly she was saying that because I'd only had 17 closings and I was typically gone all day working, which in another class, we'll talk about time management stuff. And I'm going to show you how you can, I have a tool for you on that will help you be more effective with your time too. But I just had to say to my wife the same thing. Hey, it's for a week. I've already made my appointment. Let's see what happens. Now, typically when I was doing 50 contacts a day, I was not setting an appointment. I probably would get 1, maybe 2 a week, like is all I was getting. So this whole thing of that first day, getting an appointment. Oh, one other piece I left out. The other thing he told me, if you'll go from doing this 50 contacts a day to just set 1 new appointment, he said, you'll prospect half as much. You'll spend half as much time prospecting, but you'll double your income. So for me, again, I was like going from 17 or 34,000 to over, 70,000. I was like, done. Yeah, great. So I set my appointment every single day that week. I told you before, it was taking me somewhere between 4 and 5 hours typically to get 50 contacts, and I was not setting appointments. All of a sudden, within that week, I would prospect 2 to 2.5 hours. I would set an appointment and be done. Now, I couldn't see that early that this was going to double my income going up, but I could see that it was, hey, I'm more effective. Now, we already talked about of what would change. Well, the first thing that would change is you change when you have your focus on, I have to set a certain number of appointments during the week, then your focus changes when you're prospecting. So the other thing that changes, which you guys brought up already, is your approach. Your approach to prospecting will change as well. Now, I already showed you somewhat what my prospecting looked like, but let me show you actually what my door knocking, how it changed, okay? So initially, my door knocking sounded like this. Knock, knock.
Hi.
Hi, my name's Russ. I'm with Century 21. We just listed a home for sale over on Birch and Pine. It's got 4 bedrooms, 3 baths, listed for $499,999. And I just was wondering who you know that would want to move into the area.
I don't know anybody.
Okay, well, I appreciate you thinking about it. Have you thought about selling it all?
No.
You haven't? Okay. Well, here's my card. If you hear of anybody thinking of buying or selling, have them give me a call.
Thank you.
Okay, bye. And then I'd go, there's one contact. Then I'd go to the next door. Hi, my name's Russ. I'm with Century 21. We just listed your neighbor's home, blah, 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 blah. Do you know anybody?
No.
Have you thought about selling your house?
No.
Okay, well, here's my card. If you do, give me a call. That's what my prospecting looked like when I was focused on contacts. Because again, if you stop and think about it, if you have to get to 50 contacts, you start to kind of go, okay, I got to get through this as fast as I can. In fact, Jason Carlson told a story one day of he decided he wanted to get 100 contacts in a day. Now, I've never done that because I'm just like, I don't want to do that. That's a lot. But he decided he said, I'm going to get 100 contacts in one day. And I don't remember how many hours it took him, somewhere 8 to 10 hours of straight prospecting to get to 100. Guess how many appointments he said at the end of the day of making 100 contacts? 0. None. So that's the part, that's, again, you need to keep track. Don't hear that I'm saying don't keep track of your contacts. You need to keep track because that's how you're going to know how effective you're being. But don't have that be your focus. Your focus has to be on, I am prospecting to set an appointment. And so let me show you how it changed for me. Because here's what changed. If I now know, see before, if I went to Jessica, the most I'm going to get is a contact. Next, most I'm going to get from Jordan, contact. Then I'd go to the next. And that's the most in my mind. That's as soon as I got the contact, I had done my job. Now, all of a sudden it's changed and I've got to set an appointment. So now watch how this changes, because if I can set an appointment with Jordan, I don't even have to go knock on your door. So now watch what happens. So now this is how I change things. So knock, knock.
How's it going?
Good. My name's Russ. I'm with Century 21. We just listed your neighbor's home over on Birch and Pine. It's got 4 bedrooms, 3 baths, listed for $499,900. Just was curious who you know that would want to move into the area.
I don't know that I know of anybody.
Don't know of anyone? Okay, well, I appreciate you thinking about it. How about you? Have you thought about selling your house at all?
Not really. I mean, we like the area. We've been here a while. so.
Okay, and don't roll over. Don't just, only give me an appointment if you feel like it would be good. Okay, all right, so you like the area, you've been here for a little bit? Really? So how long have you been here?
10 years.
10 years. Wow, that's great. Where did you move from?
We moved from up in Davis County.
From Davis County down to here? Really? So what brought you here?
Work, it was a little bit
Work.
closer drive.
Makes sense. Yeah, so who do you work for?
I work for the copper mine.
Oh, for the copper mine.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Well, that's great. Well, hey, let me just ask you, if you ever were to move, where would you go next?
Ooh, probably more into South Jordan area.
South Jordan?
Yeah.
Okay.
We like that area.
Cool. Yeah, it's a great area. So when do you think that would be?
Well, I don't know. Me and my wife haven't really even talked about it.
Haven't, so it's not something that's really close on your radar.
No, not really.
Okay, well, let me ask you this. How are you using real estate to plan for your financial future?
Just kind of hoping that our value goes up on our house.
Sure, yeah, and in fact, how awesome would it be as the value goes up on that, if you had 2 or 3 other houses that the value was going up on as well? I mean, have you ever considered owning an investment property?
I've always thought it would be nice, but it just seems like it's a little unrealistic for us.
Yeah, so that's one of the things actually that I like to do is help people, and I'm not saying that it's not unrealistic, I don't know if it is or isn't. But what we should do is sit down and spend 15-20 minutes where I can just walk you through the process. And hey, if you're not ready, no worries. But if you are, we could get you going on getting a property, so you can start getting twice the equity in, growing in 2 properties instead of just 1. So what works better, afternoon or evenings?
Evenings,
And would 5 or 6 be better?
probably 6.
Okay, so would tomorrow at 6 work?
Sure.
Perfect. Let's plan on that then. Boom, I just got my appointment. I could be done for the day and go home, right?
It goes back to, that's great, but how do you know what to say at that appointment?
Well, so that's where, again, I would
Back to the
say,
principal broker.
yeah, that's when you're gonna come in and go, okay, Ruby or Russ
Yeah.
or Jason or Nick. Hey, I just got an appointment and to talk to somebody about investment properties. What do I do?
Okay,
And then we'll sit down with you, we'll go through it. But ultimately, here's what I would do in this scenario, though. After I set the appointment, and here's the key thing, after I set the appointment, now I'm gonna start to try to pre-qualify. Sometimes agents want to pre-qualify beforehand, meaning they would have gone, well, how much money, Jordan, have you got for a down payment? And what's your credit score? And when I'm saying pre-qualify, I don't necessarily, even though what I just did was around finances, I don't necessarily mean always around the finances when I say pre-qualify. It's more of the motivation when I'm saying pre-qualify. But before I go and met with him, I would 100% have had him talk to a lender to find out, is it going to be even possible?
before you go to the appointment.
Before I went to, but notice I scheduled
Okay.
it.
Yeah,
But then before I left, I would have said, all right, Jordan, so I'm gonna have my lender give you a call. And they're just gonna get the preliminary information to make sure that we know where you're at, what you can afford as far as an investment property. So I'm not gonna say to make sure that you can afford to do it. I'm saying to find out how much you can afford as terms of an investment property, because I want to give them hope. And even before I leave his door, I'm gonna be like, this is gonna be exciting. This is gonna be fun. We're gonna start helping you double your income. I mean, seriously, stop and think about if people had owned 2, 3, 4, 5 houses over the last couple of years. How, you could, if you had 5 properties, yeah, you could sell them all and retire at this point, right? So to some extent, I'm gonna be like, hey, this is gonna be exciting. We're gonna get you on a good path to having some financial freedom or whatever. You wanna give them some excitement. Does that make sense? Okay.
Are there lenders out there that can pre-qualify somebody without credit checks?
Yeah.
I know some people that might be well, I don't want my credit pulled, I don't, for whatever reason.
Yeah, so yes, they could first just at least find out how long you've been on your job, how much money do you have as a down payment, what kind of ballpark. But the other side of that is, a lot of times people are worried about that, and if they are, it's just for you guys to know, typically it's gonna make a very minimal impact on their credit if they do pull it. And in fact, I have actually seen where, because one of the things that we'll talk about another time is I always want to get the people, so let's say you said, oh, well, I've got a lender, I could call and talk to him. I probably still would have said, hey, that's awesome, but I'm gonna have my lender give you a call just as a backup, just in case. And that way we'll have two different opinions. Like, I want to try to get people using the lender I've used, just because I know what I'm dealing with when I'm dealing with them. And so as a result of that, though, I have actually had, when my lender then pulled their credit score had gone up. So I actually will use that as even a joke with people, is I will tell them, hey, with my lender, I've had him pull it and the credit actually went up 5 or 6 points. So let's see what yours says, and then we'll have mine called too. But the other thing to keep in mind is, as long as they're not doing it a ton, the credit bureaus understand that when shopping for a mortgage, they may get it pulled 2 or 3 times. And so it's really probably not going to do anything. And if it does, it might hit it 4 or 5 points. But if they're that close, then that might be concerning. But if they're not, if they're an 800 credit score person, who cares? Like,
Right.
but so anyway, but yes, the answer is yes. If they were worried about it, I'd say, great. Just when my lender calls, tell him you're concerned about that, and he'll run you through everything else. He'll only pull the credit if it looks like it's worth doing. So, all right. Now, so let's go back to again. So what changed? What changed in my interaction the first time when I was looking for a contact versus when I'm looking now for an appointment? What changed?
More personable, kind of getting to know them more, making them feel like building a relationship.
Good. Yeah, so which that leads us to number 2. So in terms of your prospecting, your first thing is you got to be focused on, my objective is to set an appointment. The second thing is, in my prospecting, I have to connect, or you could call it rapport. I got to build some rapport. I have to connect, or I have to build some rapport. The way that you're going to do that, the way you connect and create rapport with people, is through a process where you're first going to ask a question. Okay. So we're going to always start by, I want to ask them some type of a question. And for me, where I did that was, we've listed this home. Who do you know that wants to move into the area? They're then typically going to say, I don't know anybody. Now, keep in mind, we all have a reflex no. Meaning, when you walk into a department store and they say, can I help you? What do you say? Nope, just looking, or I'm good, or whatever, right? So keep in mind, the same thing's going to happen. The whole reason I always start with, like on a just listed or a just sold, is we just listed or we just sold this home and was curious who you know that wants to move into the area, is because I know they're going to tell me no. I don't know anybody, even if they really probably do know people. So, and in fact, actually, I was doing some phone calls with some agents the other day. This was, I guess it was a week and a half ago now, but we were talking about some of this and actually making real phone calls. And one of the guys that I called up on the phone had said, these were internet leads that I had called. And the guy was like, I didn't ever sign up on a website. I'm not thinking about doing anything real estate related. And as the conversation went on, though, all of a sudden the guy went from the I'm not interested, I never did that, to, well, I would be interested in getting some commercial space to some just land to put like vehicles, to, well, I actually do want to buy a condo or a townhouse. Like, but the key thing is that you've got to build that connection and rapport in order to get that out of them. So the way you're going to do that is first asking them a question. Once they respond, we then want to repeat back what they said. Or you could think of it as you can say back the concept of what they said. You don't have to repeat everything they've said, but summarize what they've said back. And then we want to affirm it. Hey, that's great. Or, oh, that's awesome. That's exciting. I appreciate you stopping and thinking about it. Just something that is acknowledging you heard what they said and you're good with it. Now, what if I'm not good with it? What if they said, I hate realtors? I don't want, oh, you hate realtors? That's great. Like, I probably don't want to do that. So if they said, you know, hey, I'm sick of you guys knocking on my door. Oh, it sounds like you've had a ton of people knock on your door. That's, oh, I'm sorry, that's frustrating. So I'm gonna affirm it back, either if it's a positive thing they said, I want to affirm it as a positive. If it was a negative, I want to go, really interesting. Or, wow, I'm sorry, that's gotta be frustrating, something like that, okay? So we want to repeat and affirm. The other thing that's related to that we just, of the idea of, especially if they're frustrated, is empathy. We want to do, hey, if I were you, I would feel the same way. So no matter what, like, empathy is a great way for you to connect with people. And you want to do it as, if I were you, I would feel the same way too. If I were you, I would be frustrated too. If I were you, so for example, since I brought up internet leads, somebody that's on a website looking at something, and they said to me, no, we're just trying to get a feel for what's out there. Hey, if I were you, that's exactly what I would be doing too. See, people, we want to make people right, is what we want to do. So, hey, if I were you, I would have been doing the exact same thing. That's exactly what I created the website for, was for people like you to go on and search. Like, we want to use empathy. If I were you, I'd feel the same way. So if you're going to do any for sale by owners or expireds, you got to get really good at doing, if I were you, I'd feel the same way. Because in for sale by owner, if I were to ask, hey, so why did you decide to sell your home for sale by owner rather than list with an agent?
Don't want to have to pay realtor fees.
So, oh, hey, if I were you, I would want to save the commission too. Now, what I'm going to add to that though is a level shift. So I'm going to say, so what I hear you really saying though, Jordan, is you want to walk away with as much money as possible.
Yes.
So if you could do that, but still pay me a commission and you actually walk away with more money, would it make sense for us to sit down and talk more?
Yes.
See, I'm starting with empathy. Hey, if I were you, I'd want to save as much money as I could too. But really what I hear you saying is you want to, it's not about saving money. It's about you walking away with the most amount of money, right? So that's a level shift. So I'm shifting them to, don't focus on saving. Let's focus on you walking away with the most amount of money. Okay, all right. So the way you're going to connect with people is through asking a question, repeating and affirming, and or using empathy, and then you're going to ask another question. So think of it as this, it's almost like this figure 8 here. Oops, that was horribly drawn, but you get the point. So here's where I'm going to ask a question, ask a question, ask a question. Then I can ask for an appointment, ask a question, ask a question. So that's what we're trying to do with this connect and report. So for me, that's what I did when I said, so how long have you lived at this address?
10 years.
10, and then I'm repeat back 10 years. Wow, that's great. And the other thing that I do along with that is UCLA did a study where what they found is, in terms of communication, 7% of communication is the words that we use. Okay, so when we're having a conversation, the message and things that's going on, 7% of it is the words. 38% of communication is the tone that we use, or the inflection. And then 55% of communication is body language. Okay, so the reason I bring that up is because if you watch, in fact, I was going to say a good book. I actually didn't really like it that much, but a book that talks about this body language is What Every Body Is Saying, is what the name of the book is. I didn't really enjoy the read, but it's got some good information. But one of the things he talks about is you and I all have been trained to look for these micro flashes on people's face that communicate to us. So one of the things that I do, if you watch my face, so I'm going to redo that again. I'm going to say, so how long have you lived at this address?
10 years.
10 years. Wow, that's great. So like, if you watch like right in here for me, I go from, 10 years. Wow, that's great. That's sending a message of like, I'm interested in, like, I'm impressed or whatever, which creates this connection. Okay. So 10 years, that's great. Where did you move from?
Davis County.
From Davis County to here. You're kidding. What brought you here? So you'll notice that what I'm doing is just repeating and affirming and repeating and then asking another question, repeating and affirming. And what I'm trying to do is to have them then be comfortable enough talking to me so that I can say, well, if you ever were to move, where would you go next? And then that's where he said South Jordan. Oh, that's great. So when is that going to be? And what I'm looking for then is, have I created the connection enough that he'll tell me the truth? Because before it started out with, we don't know anybody, we're not thinking of moving. Yet you notice he said, well, if we were going to though, we'd move to South Jordan. Oh, well, when would that be? Well, we haven't even started talking about it. Okay, well, that's fine. So that's, once I can see that wasn't an option, then I'm going to move into, well, how do you feel about owning investment properties? And the language I always use is, how are you using real estate to plan for your financial future? Because typically they're going to say, well, I mean, we've thought about owning properties, but we haven't done anything or whatever. So how are you using real estate to plan for your financial future? I mean, stop and think about it. I don't know about you guys, but I'm like wishing I owned 10 more houses in Salt Lake than I do right now after the last couple of years, right? All right. So we got to connect. We do that through the words and the tone. Now, here's the other thing to say on this. So notice that 55% of most of the communication that goes on between people, 55% of it is the body language. It's those little things, facial expressions and things that we make. Well, if I'm on the phone, I don't have that. So I've now just gotten rid of 55%, which, so one of the things I would tell you guys is when you're on the phone, you got to overdo the body language. So if I was on the phone, not, so I can't see him, he can't see my face, and I was doing, hey, so how long have you lived at this address?
10 years.
So because he can't see me, I can't see him, I'm gonna probably go, 10 years? Are you kidding? That's great. Like, I'm gonna overdo it on the body language on the phone, because the phone tends to water it down because they can't see. Like, it's harder to make a connection on the phone, for sure, okay? So we're gonna do that through asking questions, repeating and affirming, and using empathy. If I were you, I'd be frustrated too, okay? Then, the third thing that we wanna do in our prospecting to set more appointments is you need to create value. Or the other way I like to write it is make them curious. Okay, you've either got to create value or you have to make them curious for them to set an appointment. They're either going to have to see value or they're going to have to be curious. Okay, so ultimately what I did with Jordan on that was I created value through, hey, owning investment properties. But then he was like, but I don't know that we're ready, or I don't remember how you said it. But so then I'm just going to try to make them curious. Hey, I've worked with a lot of people who are in that exact same position, and now they own a ton of investment properties. So what we need to do is sit down and just spend a few minutes and let's find out, is it something you could do? So I'm trying to just make him curious to be able to want to meet with me. Okay. Now, so the next step is, so first we got to be focused on setting appointments. The next thing we're going to do is create some connection or rapport. Then from there, I've now got to create value or make them curious to want to meet with me. Now, another book for you and this one again is a thicker book. This one actually is not a real estate. Well, what everybody is saying isn't real estate related either, but this one is The Secrets of Question-Based Selling. Thomas Freese is the author, and it's F-R-E-S-E, I think is how he spells it. But The Secrets of Question-Based Selling, I really like that one. That one is just a sales book in general, but the whole idea is how to sell through asking questions. And so now let me give you the part of the book, that's where I got this idea of you got to make people curious, is from that book. Is he says in order to set appointments with people, you got to make them curious. And the way that the example he uses on that is actually a real estate example. It's not I mean, like I said, the book is written for just sales in general, but that one section, he talks about a real estate agent and making somebody curious. So he talks about in here if you're going to leave a message on somebody's phone ever, which I'm not a big proponent of leaving a message, but if you're going to leave a message in your prospecting, so if you're calling it for sale by owner and expired or something like that, The message has to make people curious or they're not gonna call you. I mean, think about what you do. When if somebody leaves you a voicemail and it's a salesperson, how long do you listen before you delete it? Yeah, not very long. So if you're gonna leave one, it's gotta make them curious. So the example he uses in the book is this real estate agent was calling farmers, seeing if he could get them to sell their land. And then he had a developer that would come in and buy the land and then they would develop the land. Well, this Thomas Freeze was working with this agent and he had called up one of these farmers, got a voicemail, and here's what his message said was, hey, and this is what most agents do. Hey, this is Russ with Century 21. Was just calling to see if you're interested in selling your land. I've got developers that would come in and buy it, blah, 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 blah. Thomas Freeze, the author of this book, asked the agent, so how many times do people call you back? And he said, pretty much never. And he said, well, yeah, it's because you didn't make them curious. He said, let me show you how to do this and how to get them to call you back. So they make the next phone call, they get a voicemail, and he leaves Thomas then leaves this message. Hey, this is Thomas Freeze with XYZ Real Estate Company. I'm holding your tax records in my hand and I have a few questions for you. Please give me a call back.
So that makes them scared.
Well, that his point was they're going to be curious as to why. So here's the thing. So if you were calling a for sale by owner an expired listing, that could be a great message to leave that would get them to call you back is, hey, you might not say I'm holding, but you could pull it up on the MLS, their tax records, and say, I've got your tax records pulled up on the computer in front of me. I have a few questions for you if you can give me a call back.
Sounds a little bit better. Cause I feel like they might be mad when you call, like, oh, hi, I'm just calling, they're like, what the heck?
Well, so that's what he did. So when the guy called back and said, yeah, why do you have my tax records in your hand? What's going on? And he just said, oh, I just was wanting to verify. It says here that you've got however many acres. I just wanted to see, is that really how many acres that you have? Well, yes. So, but why do you have my tax records in your hand? Oh, well, because I work with a developer. Blah, blah. Anyway, apparently in the book, he says they ended up putting a deal together from that. So just know if you're going to leave a message for people, it has to be something that makes them curious. If you leave the message that all of us typically leave, hey, this is Russ, and just calling because I thought you might want to know that home prices in your neighborhood have gone up, blah, blah, blah. That's not going to make them curious. So doing something along the lines of that is going to make them curious if you're going to leave a message. Okay. But just again, in your prospecting, you got to do something to create value or to make them curious. So for me, again, back to talking about phone calls that I was making with the agents a week and a half ago, is in that we were calling off of these internet leads. One of the things that I do is here's what I know. And so think this way. Just when you're trying to create value for people, stop and think about if you were in their shoes. So back to the empathy thing, if you were in their shoes and you were doing what they're doing, what would be valuable? Well, see, here's what I know is almost every buyer out there wants a deal. And typically people will go online and start looking at properties just to get a feel for what's out there. But in fact, let me even say it this way. Years ago, I remember being on Facebook and seeing this ad that an agent had on there about short sales. Like if you're interested in short sales, blah, blah, blah. And I remember sitting there thinking as an agent, now see, this is the problem. We think like an agent rather than thinking like a potential client. As an agent, I sat there thinking, I would not want a buyer that wants to buy a short sale because I don't really want to work that type of a buyer because the short sales are kind of a pain and back then, it could take months. I saw one short sale take 2 years till it closed. And I was like, well, I don't know why this agent would advertise looking for people that want to buy a short sale because you would never do it. I wouldn't want to deal with the short sale stuff. Well, I was talking to another agent about that, and the agent said, you know what's funny about that is that, and this was a female agent, she said, I always do open houses in Sugar House. And I said, why? And she said, 2 reasons. Number one is you'll get more people that come through your open house in Sugar House than you will anywhere else in the valley. And two is the people who want to buy in South Jordan sometimes will even start in Sugar House. And I was like, really? And I've just never been interested in Sugar House area. No offense if anybody lives there, but I've never been interested in wanting to live there. So for me, I was like, but she just said, yeah, I've found that the reason you get so many people there is there are so many that want to be there. But when they see what they can actually afford, then they end up, she's like, I end up selling them houses in South Jordan, Harriman, Riverton, you know, wherever. It's because they show up here wanting something, but when they really then find out how much money they can spend and what they can get for their money, she said, I end up usually taking them somewhere else, but I always do it there. Well, that then connected me on this of almost everybody wants a deal. And so therefore, contacting people about that. So for me now, so now let's go back to a week and a half ago, I'm making phone calls with agents. One of the things that I do is I know that a lot of times people have gone to the website looking for a deal. They want to find a really good deal. So for me, if I'm calling on an internet lead, I'm going to say, hey, the reason I'm calling you is because I have access to, or I come across properties before they hit the market. Things like bank owned, short sales, HUD homes, stuff like that. If I have an idea what you're looking for, I could keep an eye out for you. Now, I feel like that usually gets people enough interested in, oh, well, yeah, this is what we're looking for. Well, then now I've created this connection and rapport as well, has created some value for them. If they say no to that, then I usually say, well, if I found a good deal, would you want to know about it? And if they say no to that, then I usually know they're probably not really that serious. So for me, you just got to stop and think like them for a minute. Think about it. Don't think like an agent. Think like the potential buyer or seller, and what kind of thing would they see as valuable? And then that's what you want to offer to them, is that to create this value. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Yes.
I have to leave in a couple minutes. Do I need to sign anything?
I forgot to print one
Oh,
off,
okay.
so let me see actually if there's a link on the back. Yeah, let me just have you guys right on here. Okay, so number 4 then. It's Jessica's leaving. We gotta hurry.
Yeah.
All right, number 4 is then you have to close. Okay, now, in terms of that, you got, and what I mean by close is you have to ask for the appointment. There are only 4 ways in the English language that you can ask for an appointment. Okay, there's only 4 ways. Sorry, 5 ways. Change my mind. There's 5. I don't know where I got 4. It's 5. There's 5 ways in the English language that you can ask for an appointment. It's what time, which time, how soon, when, and where. Those are the only 5 ways in the English language you can ask for an appointment. Which, so as a reminder too, for you guys that are on Zoom, I know some of you have, but if you haven't thrown your name in the chat box, do that so I can print it off as my attendance sheet. So, okay, back to the closing. There's only 5 ways in the English language: what time, which time, how soon, when, or where. If you say anything besides that, now you can do a version of this, like which time. What you heard me say is, hey, what works better, afternoons or evening? That is just a variation of which time. But you know, what works better, afternoons or evenings? So that is just a, and you could say it as, hey, which time works better, afternoons or evenings? So you're doing that. But if you say anything besides that, you're not asking for an appointment. A lot of times, in fact, actually, I was training this one time, this was years ago, and I had an agent from up in Ogden that was in the class, and she said to me, I say, can we get together all the time? And I set plenty of appointments. Now, here's the thing. If what you're doing works and you're happy with where your business is at, keep doing what you're doing. But, and this is how I answered it to her, is I said, that's great. If you are getting plenty of appointments by saying, can we get together? Keep asking, can we get together? But if you're not happy with where it is, then you got to change what you're saying. And she said, I'm happy with where my business is. And I said, then great, don't change it. Keep saying, can we get together? Now, here's the funny thing. As soon as the class was over, I went and looked up on the MLS to see how many closings she had had in the last year. 2. And I was like, if you're wanted, so here's what I deduced from that. If you want to do 2 closings a year, ask people, can we get together? It'll work great to get 2 closings a year. If you want to do more than that, you got to change what you're saying. So because stop and look at it for a minute. If I say to somebody, can we get together? What is that really asking? What
Can
does,
we?
can we? Yeah, what is it?
Just can we?
Permission?
Yeah.
Yeah, is it possible?
Yeah,
Like really, it's about possibilities, right? Well, is it possible for them to meet with you?
yes.
So what's really the only question?
What time?
Yeah, what time, which time, how soon, when, or where? So don't ever use can we get together, because can we get together is asking about possibilities.
Actually, my 4th grade teacher, one time I'm like, can I use the restroom? She's like, I don't know, can you?
Oh,
And
yeah.
since then it stuck with me, you know?
I had a math
Say that.
teacher, 9th grade math teacher was the same way. Oh, and
Yeah,
then if you said, can I go to the restroom? He'd say, well, are you gonna rest?
yeah,
Like, yeah, he was dumb. But yes, can we get together? Okay,
Like a math teacher.
yeah. How about, would you like to get together?
Yeah.
What is that one asking?
Sure, I don't know.
Yeah, it's kind of just, would you,
would you?
it's a
pop
matter of
it
if they would like it or not. Would
Yeah.
you like to get together? Would they like to get together? Probably not.
Yeah.
They probably wouldn't like to. Maybe they need to, whatever. So we don't want to say, would you like to? How about this one? This one's the worst one. Why don't you? Or why don't we?
Oh.
Watch this. So watch this. So Jessica, why don't you give me some money?
I don't know,
Okay,
because I don't have to.
okay. Jordan, why don't you give me some money?
I want my own money.
Okay, so you guys on Zoom, why don't you give me some money? Either unmute or throw it in the chat
Yeah,
box. Why don't you give me some money?
Thing,
What?
you haven't earned anything.
Okay,
That just sounds like you're bossing somebody
my
around
money.
though.
that sounds what?
Like you're bossing somebody around.
Okay. And Zoom's not participating apparently, so I was seeing if they were chatting or unmuting. Anything? Why don't you guys give me some money?
Bueller.
All right, Lisa said, why should I? Okay,
Okay.
so now, but how much money did I get?
None.
Notice that. Same thing happens if you say to somebody, why don't we get together? What happened by me to asking you guys, why don't you give me some money, is you all basically told me why you weren't going to.
Hmm.
Same thing applies if you said, why don't we get
You're
together?
leaving it open-ended, basically.
They're gonna tell you why you're not
Yeah.
gonna get together,
Yes.
is what they're gonna do. So there's only 5 ways: what time, which time, how soon, when, and where.
Okay,
Okay. All right.
Alright.
And since Jessica's leaving, we'll wrap up.
okay,
I'm just
sorry. I
kidding.
have
No,
one
we
more
were going
reason.
to anyway. We were going to anyway. So, okay, so any thoughts, questions? Comments? Zoom, any questions, comments, Jordan?
When you decide to go door knock an area, you look at that area like on the MLS and just kind of get an idea of. Cause like for me, I couldn't say, well, I just listed like I have never listed.
Sure.
So it would just be, I am a local realtor.
Nope. Here's what you want to do. Instead, what you're gonna do is rely on Century
The
21.
brokerage.
So find a listing in an area, find the closest Century 21 listing that's in the area you want to go. Now, I always say, if you're gonna go knock the neighborhood that the house is in, ask the agent for permission, and not that you need it necessarily, but the agent may be like, no, I just barely did it yesterday or whatever. So,
Okay.
but find a Century 21 listing that's nearby. And then knock on the door and say, we just listed your neighbor's home. And then, so just rely on that. So, but to answer your question. At the end of the day, all that matters is go knock. But to some extent, I think what you said is actually a very smart thing, is to some extent, it is a good idea to kind of see, go on the MLS and see, like. I'm always hesitant to say this because remember, I don't want you to spend a ton of time in the activities phase looking on the MLS. But I think it is a good idea to maybe go, okay, how much turnover has gone on in this area? Because if there has been a bunch going on, then that's a good area. So like, for example, on the MLS, West Valley probably tends to have like the most home sales. So that's kind of a good area to go. The other thing I would say actually too is townhouses.
Yeah.
Townhouse, like, so for me personally,
people turn over in townhouses quicker than just
Well,
your
there's not a
regular
single
house.
person living there that wants to be there for forever.
Exactly. So for me, I to some extent say townhouses are good. The flip side of that is a lot of times they're part of an HOA. And they may be like, hey, there's no soliciting as part of our HOA.
Call the HOA.
Well, no, just go do it till, yeah. Same thing with, like, I know of some agents that will go out and knock on apartment buildings too. And if the manager comes and tells you to leave, then just leave, but I think townhouses are great though to do because, like you said, people don't want to be there forever. And they those will tend to turn over 3 to 5 years versus a house is more like 8 years right now, I think is the average. So that's kind of where I would say townhouses are good, especially now that the townhouse is $500,000 too.
Right. They're not 200.
They're not cheaper anymore. So anyway, so great question. Anyone else? Let's see.
I guess for me personally, is it smarter for my time like this week to be spent on making sure my SOI knows what I'm doing
Yes,
than out
Yes.
door knocking?
yes, 100%. Yeah, thank you for bringing it up. 100% SOI is going to should be your number one source. And so you want to make it your number one. So yes, 100% spend time calling through, talking to everybody in your SOI first. Then, and even, I mean, you heard Mike, it looks like he's dropped off now, but he spends 1 week of it. But whether you do it that way, or you say, I'm going to do so many per day, but I would say, yes, 100% make that your priority. So, and then Lisa asked a question, what's the final word on the top of the 4 areas of the curve of income? So Lisa, are you meaning the one I didn't write one, or the last one I have written?
Is there a name in that last box?
There is actually,
Okay.
but I just want to make
That's
sure
probably what she's
that I'm
asking.
answering what she's asking. The one, okay, that doesn't have one. Okay, so the last one is what I call the transaction phase. So activities phase, contacts phase, appointments phase, and then the transactions phase. In the transactions phase, what you want to do there, and so Lisa, for you, this would be actually a great spot, like probably a next step for you. Meaning, like, I always think of it as a brand new agent, Jessica that was here, Jordan that's here, is get out of the activities and into the contacts phase as quick as you can. Then from there, I want to get agents out of that into just set 1 new appointment every day. Then for the agents who have been around, so for Mike that was on and for Lisa, for you, the transactions phase is keep 1 appointment every day. So the transactions phase is, the idea of that one is you don't go home until you have had an appointment, which means you probably need to be setting more like 2 appointments every day when you're prospecting in order to be able to keep 1 every day, because half of the time the appointments you set will cancel.
Okay.
So that is another good point actually to bring up, is the other thing that I learned along this way when I started doing that, I won't go home until I set an appointment, is early on, I set appointments that were crappy appointments. And again, power comes out of telling the truth. If I told the truth, I would have said, like, that probably wasn't a good appointment, but I did it just so I could say I'm done and go home. But if you have to keep 1 appointment a day, you're going to set a better appointment every day. So the idea of this transaction phase, this is the people who want to make over $500,000 a year. So like Brian Burnett that's down in St. George, my guess is he's probably keeping, he probably still only keeps 1 appointment on average, I'll bet. I'll have to ask him, I don't know. But I bet you he probably sets 2 appointments a day and probably keeps 1 every day and makes $3 million. So, I mean, yeah, you can survive off that for a little while. So yeah, anyways, great question. Any others? Okay, so Thursday, what we're gonna do then, Thursday, we're gonna build on this. So now with this as the backdrop, Thursday, what we're gonna do is we're gonna go through and we're gonna talk about the buyer and seller cycle. So the process that a buyer or seller goes through first. And then we're gonna then implement this into that. And that's where Jessica was asking, like, social media. We're gonna talk about for sale by owners, expireds, just how do you do this now in each of the areas? Because and I heard you talking about baseball yesterday, which I need to talk to you more about,
But I always say, think about it this way. And I'm a big baseball fan, so I always, when you look at the swing that different batters have. They all have the same fundamentals. But their style might be different.
They get to the contact.
That's right.
They all get the contact, but they do it in very different ways.
Yes, and so think of this as that same process. It's like how you get to this and how you go about it. You're gonna have your own style, but the fundamentals of it are never gonna change. And so now that we have that, now we can then take this and say, okay, now let's talk about each of the different ways that we're prospecting. And how do we then plug this into that? So, anyway, cool. Okay, thanks for being here. Anything else from you guys on Zoom? Oh, thanks, Lisa. Okay, yeah, so where did you play at?
So I grew up in Farmington, so I went to Viewmont,
Okay.
and then I played at Slick for 2 years and then went to UVU.